The night on the old plantation was heavier than stone. Even the wind seemed afraid to move, as though it too carried chains. A silence spread across the fields, thick and suffocating, broken only by the restless whispers of the enslaved, who spoke in fragments and never dared to finish their sentences. There was one among them, one they never called by name. To speak her name, they said, was to summon sorrow itself. She was known only as the woman. She moved through the fields like a shadow that the sun itself refused to touch. Her steps left no sound on the soil, yet every gaze followed her. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts when she passed, while men pretended not to see her at all. But their eyes betrayed them. They could not help but look, and they could not help but fear. For she carried a secret so heavy that even the chains on her wrists seemed light in comparison. The whispers told stories, each darker than the last. Some said she was cursed, born beneath an eclipse that turned her blood into night. Others swore she had once laughed like fire, before something broke inside her and left her voice cracked into silence. But most agreed on one thing. She had become a vessel for something not her own. Her womb, they said, had been taken by the master, and what grew inside her was neither fully hers nor fully his. On nights like this, when the air felt thick with unseen eyes, the enslaved gathered close around their fires, whispering of the mystery she carried. "Do you hear her at night?" One would mutter, eyes darting. "She sings to the soil." Another would shiver. "No, she curses it." But the truth was more terrible than any whisper. Alone in her shack, her body bruised and her spirit hollowed, the woman sat in silence, her hands trembling as they rested on her stomach. There was life inside her, life that the world had no place for. Her face, half in shadow, half in candlelight, was a mask of both terror and defiance. She knew the day would come when silence would shatter, when whispers would no longer be enough. And so the night lingered, holding its breath. For in the woman's body lay a secret that would wound the world. Her back was a map of cruelty. Every welt carved into her skin told a story no one dared repeat. Some scars curved like rivers, others crossed like broken roads. But all of them led back to one place, the master's whip. By day she bent over the cotton fields, her body moving like a shadow among shadows. By night she returned to her shack, the air heavy with rot and sorrow, her breath shallow, her body trembling with exhaustion. But there was a deeper wound, one no lash could carve. It lived in her belly, quiet at first, then louder, until the whole plantation seemed to listen. Whispers spread quickly. The woman was carrying life. But when the life came, it bore no resemblance to her. The night of the birth was suffocating, the air damp, the shack crowded with slave women who tried to hush their fear with humming. Sweat clung to her skin like oil, her hands clawing at the dirt floor, her cries swallowed so the overseers wouldn't hear. And then, two small wails broke the darkness. Two infants, pale as moonlight, their tiny fists clenched, their skin untouched by her own. The women gasped. One dropped the cloth in her hands. Another crossed herself with trembling fingers. Silence filled the room, heavier than death itself. For these children, born from a black woman's womb, carried the skin of their master. White, ghostly, undeniable. When word reached the big house, the master came down himself, his boots sinking into the mud as if the earth recoiled from his steps. He looked upon the infants with a crooked smile, pride dripping like venom from his lips. "Proof," he muttered, loud enough for all to hear. "Even the chains cannot hide my seed." The mistress, standing behind him, went pale, her eyes burning with a fire too sharp for tears. Her gaze cut through the woman like a blade, and the mother, weak and trembling, knew that her suffering had only begun. The infants cried, their pale faces streaked with red. She pulled them close to her chest, her arms shaking, her heart breaking. Around her, the other slaves turned their eyes away, for they understood. The children were not hers to keep, not hers to claim. They were living proof of her violation, living wounds that would never close. And so the scars of her past grew deeper. This time, not on her back, but in her soul. In the long nights after the birth, silence clung to the woman like a shroud. The pale infants whimpered in her arms, their cries softer than her heartbeat, yet loud enough to keep her awake with dread. Every sound felt like a warning, every creak in the wood like a footstep coming to take them away. She rocked them endlessly, her eyes hollow, her body worn thin. And then, one night, a hand reached through the gloom. It belonged to old Mary, the midwife of the quarters, her back bent like a broken branch, her eyes clouded yet sharp with sorrow. She had delivered countless children into a world of chains, only to see many carried away. She knew the shape of grief before it was born. Mary's fingers, rough from years of labor, brushed the infant's cheeks with a tenderness that seemed borrowed from another world. She hummed a tune, an old hymn, older than the fields, older than chains. The melody rose softly, trembling but steady, wrapping the room like a blanket. For the first time, the woman felt the air shift, heavy pain giving way to a fragile warmth. "Child," Mary whispered, her voice a rasp of both comfort and warning, "don't think of what they look like. Blood runs deeper than skin. These babes came from your body, and they'll carry your sorrow as surely as your love." The woman closed her eyes, her tears slipping silently, soaking the infant's hair. For a moment, the world shrank to nothing but the rhythm of Mary's humming and the tiny breath of her children against her chest. It was fragile, this kindness like frost glistening in the early dawn, beautiful, fleeting, destined to melt. Outside, the night stretched cold and endless, the overseer's dogs barking in the distance. Inside, 2 women and 2 infants sat in a silence that almost felt human. The woman leaned into Mary's shoulder, letting herself rest just a little. She wanted to believe the lullaby could shield them, that kindness might hold back cruelty for more than a breath. But Mary knew better. Her hand lingered a moment longer, then withdrew. The hymn ended, leaving only silence. The flame of kindness flickered, but the darkness pressed in, waiting. It was only a moment, but it was enough to remember that humanity still lived, even in chains. The pale children grew, fragile and restless, their cries piercing the air like warnings that no one wanted to hear. Wherever the woman walked, eyes followed, sharp, accusing, hungry. The quarters grew uneasy, as though her presence carried a sickness that could spread. Mothers clutched their own babies closer, shielding them as if her shadow alone could taint their blood. Men spat in the dirt when she passed, muttering of curses and betrayal. The master paraded the infants before his guests with cruel delight, lifting their pale bodies high, declaring them proof of his power. His laughter carried across the fields, louder than the crack of his whip. He called them his blood, his legacy, and each word was another chain around the woman's heart. But the mistress, her silence was sharper than knives. She watched from the veranda, her lips pressed thin, her eyes seething with a fire that threatened to consume everything it touched. Each time her gaze met the mother's, it was not just hatred, it was hunger. A hunger for vengeance, for erasure. And the woman, clutching her infants close, felt that gaze like a noose tightening around her throat. At night, whispers in the quarters turned harsher. "Why should she keep them?" one voice hissed. "Those children will grow to be masters while ours are born to chains." Another muttered, "She is cursed, carrying the blood of the one who breaks us." The firelight flickered over suspicious eyes, and the woman sat apart, rocking her children, her tears hidden in the dark. Even kindness withered. Old Mary's visits grew fewer, her hands trembling not just with age, but with fear. The woman saw it in her eyes. Even the kindest heart cannot withstand the weight of collective suspicion. She was alone, utterly alone, holding 2 children who were both her salvation and her ruin. The air on the plantation thickened with a tension that never broke. Every step she took felt watched, every breath borrowed. The shadows did not simply follow her. They closed in, pressing tighter with each passing day. And in her silence, she began to understand the truth. These children were not just a mark of her suffering. They were a sentence written upon her soul, and the world was waiting to carry it out. The mistress's voice struck sharper than any whip. "You dare stand in my house with those bastards clinging to you?" Her words were venom, dripping in front of servants and masters alike, meant to slice deeper than lashes ever could. The woman bowed her head, clutching her children tighter, their pale faces pressed into her dress, their soft cries swallowed by the heavy silence of the room. The other slaves avoided her eyes. Once they had whispered with pity, now only bitterness lingered. "Her children will never know chains," they muttered in the fields. "They will grow to command us, while our own rot in the soil." The jealousy was not cruel by choice, but born of despair. Still, it cut as cruelly as the mistress's words. At night, the woman sat in her shack, her arms trembling as she rocked her infants. She whispered broken prayers, her lips against their soft skin. Forgive me for bringing you into this world," she murmured. Her tears dampened their hair, but they did not understand, could not understand, the weight of her sorrow. The breaking point did not come in one blow. It came in pieces. It came when she saw the mistress's hand linger too long on the iron poker by the hearth. It came when she heard the overseer joke that, pale skin or not, the children would still be put to work when they were old enough. It came in the long silence of the quarters, when no one spoke to her, not even old Mary, whose eyes had turned away, heavy with shame. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the woman stumbled into the fields. She fell to her knees, her babies wailing in her arms, and pressed her forehead into the dirt. Her body shook with sobs that tore through the still air. For hours, she wept into the soil, her voice cracking, breaking, until it no longer sounded human. The earth seemed to tremble beneath her, as though it, too, carried her grief. When she finally rose, her eyes were hollow, her face streaked with mud and tears. Something inside her had cracked, something that could never be mended. The chains on her wrists still clattered, but the real chains were inside her chest, binding her heart until it could no longer beat freely. The breaking point had come, and the world was waiting for her scream. The night of reckoning came without stars. Clouds swallowed the moon, and the air grew thick, as if even the heavens turned their face away. The mistress's rage had ripened in silence, festering until it erupted. She stormed into the quarters, her silk gown dragging filth from the earth, her eyes wild with fire. Behind her trailed the overseer and 2 men, their torches spitting sparks into the night. The woman clutched her children to her chest. Their pale faces shone in the firelight, fragile as porcelain, their cries swallowed by the roar of torches. She backed into the corner of her shack, her nails digging into their skin as if she could anchor them to her body. "Thieves!" the mistress spat, her voice shrill with venom. "Your womb dares mock me. Your womb dares bear what is mine." Her scream cracked the night, louder than dogs, louder than whips. She pointed at the infants, her hands shaking with fury. "Take them. Erase this shame. Burn it from the earth." The men stepped forward. The woman howled, a sound torn not from her throat, but from her very soul. She bit, clawed, struck, her body wild, feral, as though centuries of chains had split open inside her. But the lash came down, splitting her back, silencing her roar with blood. Her knees buckled, her arms weakened, and the children were torn from her grasp. The mistress demanded fire. The overseer obeyed. Flames leapt, greedy and bright, licking at wood and straw. The shack screamed with crackling, sparks showering the night sky like falling stars. The children's cries pierced through the inferno, sharp, fleeting, and then swallowed by the roar of fire. The woman fell to the ground, her arms empty, her body convulsing in grief. Her scream rose above the flames, unearthly, endless, a sound so raw it seemed to split the heavens. The field stilled. Even the dogs went silent. Slaves in the quarters covered their ears, trembling, for the sound was not human. It was a curse. The mistress stood tall, her lips curled in triumph, but her eyes betrayed unease. For in the howl of that broken mother, there was something eternal, something the fire could not consume. The night devoured her children, but her scream devoured the land. When dawn broke, the land was smothered in silence. Smoke curled upward from the ruins of the shack, drifting into the pale morning sky like the souls of the lost. The earth stank of ash and sorrow, and the ground where fire had raged was blackened, cracked, as if the soil itself had withered. The woman lay in the dirt, her arms limp, her chest rising in shallow breaths. Her eyes were wide but empty, staring at a horizon she could no longer see. Her body was alive, but her soul was gone, consumed in the flames that had taken her children. She did not move when the overseer passed by. She did not flinch when the mistress spat into the ashes. She was hollow, an empty vessel that still breathed. The quarters were uneasy. No one spoke of the children aloud, but their absence filled the air heavier than chains. Around the fires, whispers began to grow. Her scream split the sky. Her curse cracked the ground. The fire didn't take them, it gave them back to her. The tales twisted with each tongue, but all agreed on one thing. She was no longer just a woman. Men crossed themselves when they saw her shadow. Mothers pulled their children away, murmuring prayers under their breath. Some swore they saw her lips moving at night, whispering to the soil. Others swore they heard her singing lullabies in a tongue older than memory, songs that froze the marrow of anyone who listened too long. The mistress avoided her now, keeping to the house, though her rage still smoldered behind pale eyes. The master boasted less, his voice quieter, his laughter thinner. Something about the land had shifted, and even he seemed to sense it. Crops wilted too soon. Animals grew restless, the very air heavy with unease. The woman rose sometimes, her movements slow, her steps unsteady. She wandered the fields at dusk, her eyes vacant, her lips trembling. She carried nothing in her arms, yet she cradled them as if her children were still there, rocking invisible infants against her chest. And though her arms were empty, her grief was visible, etched into every line of her face, painted into the soil with every step. The fire had devoured her children, but the silence after birthed something else, a legend. Years passed, yet her presence never faded. The fields changed hands, masters came and went, but the whispers of her grief clung to the land like smoke that never cleared. Travelers who passed by claimed to hear a woman's voice in the night, a lullaby sung soft and broken, carrying across the wind. Children in nearby villages woke weeping, their mothers swearing they had dreamt of pale infants cradled in arms of shadow. The woman's body was said to have withered, yet no one recalled her dying. Some swore she was seen wandering at dusk, her back bent, her arms still cradling air. Others claimed she no longer touched the earth at all, drifting like mist across the charred soil of her shack. No grave bore her name. No stone marked her suffering. Yet the land remembered. The roots of trees near the ruin twisted unnaturally, as though trying to crawl away. The mistress who ordered the fire grew sick, her skin paling, her nights tormented by screams only she could hear. Servants told of her waking at midnight, clutching her ears, shrieking, "She sings for them. She sings for them still." The house fell into ruins soon after, abandoned as if cursed. In the years that followed, her name was forgotten, but her legend was not. Around fire pits, elders warned children, "Do not mock the womb that bleeds, for its grief can burn the world." They told of the black woman whose children were too pale to live, whose scream carved itself into the bones of the earth. They called her the Mother of Ashes. Even now, when the wind cuts across the old fields, some swear they hear her song. A lullaby without words, heavy with mourning, endless in its sorrow. Those who linger too long feel their arms grow heavy, as though holding a weight that is not there. They say the earth itself still cradles her pain, passing it into the marrow of anyone who dares to listen. And so her story lingers, not with resolution, but with haunting, not with justice, but with warning. She was a woman once, broken by cruelty, but in her suffering, she became something greater, a wound that time could not heal, a lullaby the land itself could never silence. And if you stand too long in those fields, you may hear her too.